Hello, everyone. I'm Tony Lombardi with Russell Street Report, and I'll be joined today by Super Bowl 47 champion Dennis Pitta. We'll get to know a little bit about his whereabouts these days and also his involvement with Levy Restaurants, which you'll find when you get into M&T Bank Stadium this summer and this fall. So, before we get to talking about the upcoming Ravens season and the game tonight, of course, between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens, let's talk a little bit about Levy Restaurants. Before I get to Dennis, I did want to share with you guys a little message from Levy Stadium. They work together closely to reimagine food and beverage concepts in every area of the stadium. There were significant renovations made to the physical stadium along with a menu overhaul. So, Dennis, knowing what you know about Levy, what can Ravens flock expect to any surprises when they walk into the stadium for the first time this season?
Yeah, I think it will be a tremendous fan experience when we kick off the season home opener September 15th against the Las Vegas Raiders. I think, uh, there's been a lot of upgrades, not only around the stadium, but obviously, like you mentioned, with Levy and the food and beverage and concessions and all of that. And I think it's an exciting partnership, not only for the Ravens, but obviously for Levy Restaurants as well. And so everyone's looking forward to being able to check out, all that they have to offer come the home opener against the Raiders. And I'm no exception to that. We were able to shoot a fun commercial. You can check out my Twitter and see that spot that we shot. But we were there amidst all the construction and everything going on at the stadium, and was able to, be there with Poe and get, that commercial done. And I think it's going to be a much anticipated debut when the Ravens come home in a couple weeks, and we're able to kind of experience all that M&T Bank has to offer now.
Well, Levy is an establishment, or is part of many establishments across the country. How did you specifically get involved with them?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, they reached out and had interest in partnering, and certainly, I jumped at that opportunity. And it's a great name. It's obviously a great business, and I think the Ravens across the board, as an organization, are excited to be able to partner with Levy. And so, it's a great step in the right direction for the stadium and game day experience. And it's going to be a fun season alongside Levy at M&T Bank Stadium.
Now, little birdie told me that you have a ravenous appetite for chicken wings or fingers.
I mean, who doesn't love a good chicken tender, right? And they're exceptional over there. I was able to try some during our shoot, and I can say they're very, very good. And so, listen, I was able to do that commercial shoot alongside Poe, like we mentioned, and even though Poe's a man of few words, we had a lot of fun doing it. And I think I, for one, am certainly excited about what game day is going to be like at M&T Bank.
A funny side story about Poe. I know the guy under the costume. He's a friend of a family guy.
Yeah.
He was telling me about a convention that all the mascots go to, and I said, "Wait a minute, all the mascots are at a convention. What do you do? Because you guys can't talk." They said, "We play games together and stuff like that." But I get it about the guy who's a man of few words. Now, what can fans learn, or how can fans learn a little bit more about the collaboration between Levy and the Baltimore Ravens?
Yeah, I mean, obviously through social media is a great resource, and like I mentioned, I was able to post the commercial shoot that we did on my Twitter. You can obviously learn more about it, on Levy's social media pages, and certainly the Ravens as well. And so there's a lot of great content out there, and kind of explaining and showcasing our partnership. And like I said, I think we're all excited, for the season to start at the M&T Bank Stadium, but we're also excited for the game tonight. And I think it's been much anticipated, this matchup again from the AFC Championship game a year ago. And in Kansas City, we get a great match against the Ravens and the Chiefs.
Well, before we get into that, I wanted to say congratulations on your partnership with Levy, and it sounds like an exciting thing for Ravens fans, really enhancing the game day experience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And like I said, I think the game day experience, the fan experience is going to be tremendous this year. And Levy has done a great job. The Ravens have put a lot of money into upgrades in the stadium, and I think it's just going to be a fun season. Not only in the stadium and the stands, but certainly the product on the field. I think we're all excited about what we're going to see.
And they'll be even more excited if they come away with a W after tonight's game. So that should be fun. That will be a great start to the season when they host the Raiders next week. Now, when I look at the 2023 season, Dennis, it was obviously a big disappointment. And, I went to the game. I'm a big fan, and it was just a heartbreaking loss. And it reminded me a lot of the loss of the 2011 Ravens during the Lee Evans strip and the Billy Cundiff missed field goal opportunity. And I thought that 2011 season, the team was a little stronger than the 2012 season. I also think that the 2023 Ravens were a little stronger than the 2024 Ravens. But you guys did it. What did you guys do? How did you rebound from such a devastating loss in 2011 to go through some trials and tribulations in 2012, but to put it all together at the right time to win Super Bowl 47?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that because I was just talking about that, and there's so many parallels between 2011, 2012, and what we're seeing now. You kind of have the established enemy and foe in the Patriots back then, who were winning Super Bowl after Super Bowl, and we kept just falling short to them in the postseason. We went and played them in the AFC Championship game, had an opportunity to win that game, and fell just short. Like you mentioned on some of those plays that we didn't make at the end of that game. And so you look at now, how it's playing out this year, and you have that traditional foe again in the Kansas City Chiefs, who have won multiple Super Bowls, back-to-back Super Bowl champions, now trying to go for their third. Everything seemingly runs through Kansas City to try to make it to the Super Bowl at this point. And, the Ravens got to that point last year and made some errors in that game. I mean, you talk about the Zay Flowers fumble at the goal line and some things that, uncharacteristic of who they were throughout the course of the season. But the ball didn't bounce their way for whatever reason in some of those moments, and they fall short again and don't make it to the Super Bowl. And you see them, the Chiefs go on and obviously win it. And so I anticipate, much like you mentioned, us being able to see a rematch in the AFC Championship game, Ravens Chiefs. And I think everybody would love that. I think the NFL would love that for rating reasons and all of those things. But I think the Ravens have what it takes to be able to get back to that point. I mean, anytime you have Lamar Jackson under center, you have a great chance to be successful. And yeah, I think the Ravens lost a couple pieces defensively. Like you mentioned, you look on paper and this team may not be quite as strong of a roster as they were last year. But you also add some really important and key elements, Derrick Henry being one of those on the offensive side and what he's able to do in the run game. And you still have kind of that core nucleus of guys defensively with Kyle Hamilton and some of those guys. And, how will they build chemistry throughout the course of the season? How will they play? I think for us in 2011, what was really important for us to be able to get back to that point is the leadership we had in the locker room. We had Ray Lewis, we had Ed Reed, we had Terrell Suggs, we had those guys who made sure that we stayed motivated through the offseason, that the messaging was right, that we were a good football team, even though maybe on paper we weren't quite as talented, which I probably agree with. We had the mentality and the motivation to get back to that point. And when we got back to that point, because the messaging and the leadership had been right all throughout the course of the year, we were confident and we knew we had a great opportunity to win that game, and we did. And I think what's going to be important is the leadership in the locker room for the Ravens. And you have great leaders on that team, and you have guys that can control the messaging. You have an experienced head coach in John Harbaugh who's been, through this same experience. And so I think the Ravens are poised to be able to make another run at it and position themselves again in the AFC Championship game and hopefully get over the hump this time.
Yeah, you have Roquan Smith, who is like the modern day generation of Ray Lewis. I mean, he
For
really
sure.
talks a lot like him, so he's a leader that way. Dennis, you also mentioned a couple of the young players, and I think one of the mistakes people make when they look at a roster, myself included, is the growth of a player. that player is not a static guy. Zay Flowers is going to be better in 2024 than he was in 2023. Another guy, Isaiah Likely, will probably be better in 2024 than he was in 2023. And one of the challenges the Ravens have is to use both Likely and Mark Andrews on the field at the same time. Having played that position, what are your thoughts on how Todd Monken ought to go about doing that?
Yeah, and I think it's a very good point because as unfortunate as the Mark Andrews injury was last year, I think it was huge for Isaiah Likely and his development. Because had Mark stayed healthy, Isaiah, would not have seen the opportunities that he saw last year. And so for his growth and his development, it was huge. And all you can ask for is an opportunity in this league. But when it comes, you got to make the most of it. And Isaiah certainly did that. And so there had been a lot of talk about Isaiah and his abilities and all that through really his first two seasons. He came on, very strong as a rookie in training camp. We heard a lot about him, but his opportunities were few and far between because you have a great tight end in Mark Andrews. And so when Mark went down last year, Isaiah really stepped into that role and flourished. And he was able to build chemistry with Lamar Jackson. You saw Lamar's trust in Isaiah Likely in critical situations really grow throughout the course of the year. And Isaiah became, one of his go-to targets. And so now, you have that experience coupled with Mark Andrews now healthy and back and ready to go. And you have a great, if not, one of the best tight end tandems across the league. And the tight end position has been undervalued for a long time, but I think it's, with Travis Kelce and his emergence and George Kittle and all those guys, I think people are starting to really understand to be successful on offense, you need to have a dynamic tight end. And all of those great offenses do. And so with the Ravens being able to have really two great tight ends, it gives them a lot of versatility. Because with two tight ends, and this is something that I really learned with my time in Baltimore, is when you put two tight ends on the field, it makes it difficult for defensive coordinators to figure out, well, how should we, from a personnel standpoint, match that? Should we add an extra linebacker to help bolster ourselves in the run game? Because now you have two extra blockers who can be physical and block you at the line of scrimmage. Or because those guys are dynamic pass catchers, do we add an extra DB and go some kind of a sub package to be able to help ourselves in the pass game? And so there's kind of that chess match between defensive coordinators and offensive coordinators from a personnel standpoint when you put two tight ends in the game. And so it'll be interesting when both those guys are in the game to see how defenses match that, how they view those tight ends. And, if they put an extra DB in, well, now it gives the Ravens an opportunity to really be physical and outmatch teams in the run game. If they add an extra linebacker, well, now it gives you opportunities in the pass game to create some mismatches. And so I think, Todd Monken in this offense, I think they're going to have a lot of versatility to be able to play both those guys at the same time. And listen, Mark Andrews is the lead dog in that room, but Isaiah Likely has earned his opportunities and has earned, targets in this offense. And so I think you're going to see a lot of two tight ends. I think there's going to be times where Mark's the only tight end on the field. I think there's going to be times where Isaiah is the only tight end on the field. And it just gives them a lot of leeway about, how they can kind of construct things offensively and really play a game with the defense and get themselves in the best possible matchups.
You've mentioned the chess match with defensive coordinators, and the Ravens had some significant losses on their defensive staff. They lost Mike McDonald, obviously head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. They lost Denard Wilson. He's now the defensive coordinator in Tennessee. And they lost Anthony Weaver to the Miami Dolphins, where he's also a defensive coordinator. How does a team overcome such big losses in a coaching staff and still keep the coordination and the semblance of the scheme that they've built over the years and get it out on the field in a productive way?
Yeah, I think in the NFL, you kind of become accustomed to turnover like that. I mean, certainly from a roster standpoint, you have significant turnover year after year. Most teams have kind of a core of 15, 20, 25 guys usually that kind of carry over from year to year. But a lot of the back end of your roster is just completely different. And it's no different in coaching. I mean, when I was playing for the Ravens, I think I had 6 different offensive coordinators in 7 years. We had probably 3 or 4 different defensive coordinators throughout that span as well. I mean, you anticipate when your team is good and successful, those coordinators, those position coaches, they get jobs elsewhere. They get, hired away and they get, better opportunities. And that's just part of the game. That's just something that you kind of learn to overcome and learn to adapt to. And so, as good as Mike McDonald's was, certainly as a coordinator, and it is a big loss. I think, you have people in that building who are certainly capable of stepping right in and filling those shoes. I played with Zach Orr, in my career in Baltimore. He's a great guy. He's a smart guy. I think he's going to do a great job with that defense. Yeah, he's inexperienced as a defensive play caller, but everybody is in their first go around, and it doesn't mean they're not going to be a great coordinator. You just gain that experience as you go, and I think he'll learn from some things this year, and by the end of the season, I think you'll see a guy who really, is able to create fits for offenses, and a guy that's, every bit as good as Mike McDonald. And I think the Ravens have a ton of trust in him and confidence in him being able to step in and fill those shoes left by Mike.
The Ravens are dedicating their season to the huge losses of Jacoby Jones and Joe D'Alessandro. So I was wondering if you could share a story with each one of those guys. I know Jacoby was a Super Bowl champion with you on the 2012 team. Things that come to mind when you think of those guys.
Yeah, it's so sad, to lose people so important to not only the organization, but close friends. Jacoby was a friend of mine, and I played with him for several years in Baltimore. And, Jacoby was a guy who was just the life of every room and had a ton of energy. Everybody liked him. He was the guy who at practice was off doing dance moves whenever he wasn't in. You look over and you just start laughing because Jacoby's doing some, outrageous dance move that, I certainly didn't have the courage to ever do. And, he was a great teammate. He was a great person. And obviously a guy who was a great football player. And, that was a tough one to, see this last, handful of months, is his passing. And, obviously hits super close to home. And like you mentioned, Joe D, I didn't have as much time with Joe D as I did with Jacoby. I think just my last season, Joe D came onto the coaching staff, but I got to know Joe pretty well. And Joe was a guy who, even though I didn't work closely with him on the field, he'd come up to me, ask how my family was doing, ask how life was going. It was always about more than football with Joe D. And, unfortunately we lost him as well, like you mentioned. And so, I think it's important to pay tribute to both those guys, because both mean so much to the organization and did so much for all of us, both on the field and off the field. And, man, I wish I could, be playing right now, having that decal on my helmet and being able to support and pay tribute to those guys, because we lost two great individuals this past off season, and unfortunate that they won't be on the sidelines or in the stands or able to support the Ravens in any way this season.
So as the players play with heavy hearts, and you mentioned the decal, what do you expect from the Ravens in 2024? And specifically, what do you expect from tonight's game in Kansas City?
Yeah, I think with tonight's game, you're going to see a Ravens team that's motivated, that's ready to play, that's hungry. They left last season with a bad taste in their mouth. And it's rare that the team that knocks you out of the postseason, the team that crushes your dream of being able to be in the Super Bowl, you get an opportunity to play again and get revenge against in week one. And I think the Ravens will be very motivated and ready to play. And, Coach Harbaugh always has his team prepared at the beginning of seasons. And they have tough training camps. They run a lot of plays. They do a lot of things to prepare themselves for September football. And one of the messages for Coach Harbaugh throughout the course of training camp and getting ready for the season is always, we have to start fast and we have to play well through the first quarter of the season and position ourselves to then play well throughout the rest of the season. And so I think the Ravens typically get off to a fast start, and I think you'll see that tonight. And listen, it's no easy task. You go against the two-time defending champions and the Chiefs, and they're at home, and they're going to have, a crowd behind them and a lot of energy and certainly playmakers all across the field. And so the Ravens have their work cut out for us, but if, I were a betting man, I would take the Ravens tonight.
Well, Dennis, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for sharing about Levy Restaurants, your affinity for chicken fingers, and about the Baltimore Ravens and the touching stories regarding the two lost brothers of the team, Jacoby Jones and Joey D. So
Thank you, Tony. It was great talking with you.
likewise. Thanks.